I would believe that there's a creator. There might be a creator of the universe, and that creator is interested in my life, and that creator is probably very powerful and knowledgeable. I think that's as far as I could go. Um, I don't think I think I would have reasons to believe that this creator is not the set of omni properties uh, that classical monotheists always ascribe to God. I would not believe that uh, because I think there are going to be logical problems with those sorts of properties and conjunction with the existence of evil.
Okay, gotcha. Um, okay, so well, that's interesting. So you at least leave yourself open for the possibility of a powerful being existing that you might call God, but you wouldn't ascribe to him like being all powerful for various reasons.
Right.
So what do you think? What would be sufficient evidence for you to believe that God is all powerful?
Well, okay. Uh, there are going to be things. So again, it's not just each one. Okay, this is a good question, and I'm trying not to get too technical here because I'm going to lose all my viewers. So there's discussions about what all powerful means. Okay,
Everything
and
that's
I'm
anything, the ability to do anything that's logically possible.
yeah, there's even a problem with that. But it so the point, um, there's certain paradoxes that are. It doesn't matter. Like, what's the relation? Because I think what all powerful ends up being is something to do with infallibility, and then infallibility kind of destroys agency in my point, my perspective. But it doesn't matter. The point is that let's suppose it's coherent. Um, I mean, I would have to believe God would have to change my psychology into believing things like either the Holocaust is not, he is going to have to convince me the Holocaust is a good thing, that sexual assault is a good thing, that all the horrible things that I see around me, like he's going to have to do some major psychological revision, right?
Right.
And I wouldn't be in control of that. I can't help myself but think that what happened during the
Well,
Holocaust,
hold on. Let me pause you there. What
yeah,
if so I think a mistake you're making there is that you're thinking the only solution is editing your psychology, whereas you're not leaving open the possibility that there is, with your current psychology and your moral intuition, that there is an answer that is sufficient. So it sounds like you're presupposing that there is no sufficient answer that would satisfy you without changing your psychology.
yeah, but look, yeah, that's called skeptical theism. So skeptical theism is this idea that when you look around and see all of these events like SAing, murder, stealing, genocides, that you are actually misperceiving that what it seems like it's gratuitous. It seems like it's unnecessary evil, but really it should happen for some other reason, or God has morally sufficient reason. What's happening there is that my moral perceptual faculties are not working. And God is in control of that. I'm not in control of that. Right. I could say that, well,
Not
God could say, well, not,
necessarily, because
oh, I think necessarily. Right.
because
Um,
I think you're drawing like a kind of a false dichotomy there. It could be that while because you're kind of saying like God has made it so that I like if these things are correct, He's given me a certain understanding, and like that understanding is either in error and needs to be changed,
it's not
or
that exact. No, it's not, no, not even that. Eventually, our values are why do you find this good? Because this is good. Why do you find that good? Because this is good. And eventually, you're going to get to a point where you have base values that are given to you by the world, right? They're not intended for, okay? And that is at the level. That's what I call at that level. It's called moral perception. The idea is that when you look at something, let's say a mugging or SAing or Ring or something, you see something, you just form the belief that it's good or bad, and it's not inferred to. That is because it's unintentional. That's why I'm calling it a perceptual faculty, right? And if it's unintentional, that means that it's outside of my control and it's in the domain of God's control. right?
Okay.
I don't. In the same way that I'm looking at this Coke can right here, right? It's red. Did I intend to see it as red? No. There's a certain way that my perception works such that it just appears as red. It's not like it's not up to my freedom to say what color this appears like.
Well, this is really interesting because like color doesn't actually exist. Like
Oh,
it's
let's
essentially
not get that far. Let's
electromagnetic waves within a certain wavelength that our brain it receives those electrical signals of that certain frequency and interprets it as color, but the actual universe has no color. There's just
oh
electromagnetic
well.
wavelengths of different
Well, there's two senses of color,
frequency.
right? There's the scientific sense of color, and then there's the qualia, the which is different. Okay. The point
The
is that
perception, yeah.
yeah, the qualia is what it looks like to you, right? It's not,
Yeah.
and the idea is that scientists provide correlations of certain measurable facts like wavelength and say that go that well that's color, that's what explains your qualia, right? But that doesn't that's a side issue. The point is that I when I look at something and it appears a certain way, I'm not in control of that, given it's a perception. Okay. And um and so if I look at a genocide and it appears to me as something undesirable or I disvalue it. At some point, it's not up to me, right? It's a perception. And the thing is that God has control. Since it's not to do with my volition, it's in the domain of God's control. God could make, just like God could make this appear green to me, right, without taking away my volition, God could make a genocide look good to me. And so, but
Mhm.
nonetheless, genocides look bad to me. But if God is telling me that the genocide is actually a good thing for some other purpose, then my perceptions are not intact.
Well, maybe okay, so let's stick with the genocide thing, for example, or R word. Like, I
Hmm.
think that like God has to give us a somewhat accurate ability to perceive things that like we just know morally, intuitively are bad, like R word and stuff like that. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's morally wrong for letting those things exist. I
Um,
don't think the direct connection between those two things.
well, what I'm trying to say is that if a genocide occurs and it seems wrong to me, and that's not volitional, then I'm not even saying God is doing the wrong thing yet. I'm not even going that far. I'm just saying that God allowed for me to misperceive the situation. And so there's a sense in which at least my moral perceptual faculties are totally unreliable.
Okay, so you're saying that you can't necessarily trust your moral intuition?
Your moral perceptions or your knowledge of the external world, right? Because then if the idea is that if God is willing to allow to for your perceptual faculties to be compromised, then suddenly am I really seeing is what I'm really seeing reality? And this is I didn't make this up. This is an argument. Have you heard of Stephen Law?
I've heard of it. I'm not super familiar with it. I've heard of the name though.
Is he's a it's all esoteric. But the point is that he presented this objection. There's a guy I think his name is Michael Bergman who came up with this theodicy. It's called skeptical theism. And what Stephen Law says is that if you believe that God that what you're witnessing, well, there's actually morally sufficient reasons for God allowing that kind of thing, well, then that leads to a view called either a global skepticism, which means that you can't really trust any of your knowledge of the external world because God, for all you know, God is allowing or because He's in control of your perceptual faculties, God is allowing their compromise, their unreliability, and so I
Well,
think that yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'm with you on this to a certain degree because like there are people who think R there's nothing wrong with R, and there are it's a very small number of people, but there's a small number of people out there that see nothing wrong with what Mustache Man did. So
Yeah.
there's different people with what you're talking about, different moral perceptions,
Mhm.
and they can't both be correct. So how do we know ours is correct?
Yeah, I think that's a little, that's definitely to be considered. But I think, like, okay, I presumably you and I agree that the Holocaust was not good.
100%.
Okay, but if it's the case that God is using the Holocaust for a greater good, that means that it should have occurred for the greater good.
Um, oh yeah, I think this is where we talked about before, and this was okay. So should it have occurred? It would be better if it had not occurred, but like I think that the only reason it could have occurred in that situation is because it brought about something like better, basically. I mean, to skip ahead to it, like my belief is that generally God allows us to see evil as a warning. He allows us to see evil in this temporary world. He restricts it to this temporary world so that we can make an informed as possible decision about the conditions we want to live in eternity.
Yeah, look, let me use an analogy to get at my, because I think it could be my fault. We're missing the integral part of what I'm trying to say, and it's so hard for me to explain.
Yeah, I know
It's
this
like,
is a tricky one.
it's like this. I have a concept of love, okay? And let's say, so love to me is a set of attributes and a set of behaviors that one might do for my benefit or whatever, right? So let's say that I start dating someone, they say they love me, right? And that makes predictions about what I should see in in the relationship. But then throughout the relationship, this person cheats on me, physically abuses me, verbally abuses me,
Mhm.
calls me names, and um deliberately misuses my money. At some point, well, I'm like, I don't understand. I thought you loved me. I'm like, this is love, right? This is what it means to be good. Now, it's all for some greater good, right? That I'm doing all these things, that I'm verbally saying these things to you, I'm physically doing these things to you, I'm spending all your money like this.
Mm.
It's just all for some greater good. Now, let's say she's right. Okay, let's say she's right that ultimately all these things led to some better outcome in the future for our relationship. Okay, that means that I was wrong about it being the kind of thing that shouldn't happen, right? That
Right.
I actually didn't see it as, even I saw it as wrong, but I was wrong in my perception. Is actually something that should have occurred given what
Well,
happened.
okay, maybe maybe this could okay. I think I see what you're getting at.
Mhm.
Like because the issue you're running into in that scenario is things that to your moral intuition just like our moral intuition says, okay, this is wrong. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and then somebody's trying to tell you, no, it's good that these things are happening. So like, the first thing is I don't think that like I wouldn't say that it. I mean, it's bad in the sense that in that moment that is like not a good thing happening in
Well, no,
considering
it's
like time
something
frame
that
like
should
those.
for a greater good, right? And it's actually not directly analogous. It actually works because suppose not only does this girlfriend do all these things, but she's actually controlling the way that I perceive what she's doing as right or wrong. In other words, she's in control of the way I see things. So
Right.
now what's happening is that she's allowing me to see it all wrong for some other greater good. And so suddenly I have reasons not even to trust any of my perceptions, right? For all I know, she's just letting me misperceive everything for some greater good, and I can't trust my perceptions anymore. And so here the girlfriend is God, and the girlfriend is way more powerful, is less powerful, but God is the kind of powerful being that is in control of the way I see things. So that's what really, I think, sinks, really for me creates the problem, is that God is in control of the way I see things, and allowing me to see all these things as bad when they're actually for a greater good. That's kind of the issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, there. Okay, so the only issues with the analogy too is like, okay, so the girlfriend would have to be all knowing and know that these things would, with 100% certainty, bring about good. But the issue with your analogy and like God is that your girlfriend is the one causing those bad things to happen, whereas God isn't necessarily directly causing those things to happen because, um, like in your analogy, the girlfriend is causing it, but with God, He has created other free will agents, and
Yeah,
those
but we
free will agents
make
are
it
choosing of their
right.
own volition to do bad things.
Let's say she doesn't directly do anything. She just allows her friends or her even her enemies to do these things to me while she watches. You can just make an
Well, okay,
analogy.
so let me let me kind of take your example and give you something really similar, like a similar analogy. Okay, Danny. Let's say that you have a best friend, right? And let's say that you and I are friends, right? And like I've given you warnings about this best friend of yours, and I've been telling you that this best friend is not who you think they are. They're doing evil things and like behind your back, and you're just like, oh, I don't believe it. I've known this person for years, but for some reason I have higher knowledge than you. Let's say I've personally witnessed things, and I have like empirical observation that I know what I'm saying is 100% true, and you're rejecting it. So what I might do is not necessarily cause your best friend to do something bad, but if they were going to do something bad to you, and I knew that you were going to see it and realize I was correct, I would not stop them from doing something bad. Like let's say they thought you were on vacation and they were going to go into your house and rob your house and like damage it, right? Something that would harm you. And I knew that this was going to happen and I 100% could have stopped it, but I chose not to because I needed you to see that the person you thought was your best friend was not your best friend, and the only way to do that was let you suffer that specific suffering.
Yeah, I
You
have
know
no
what?
problem with this, right? That I'm actually granting all of this in the girlfriend example, right? The idea is that the girlfriend is allowing her friends and enemies abuse me, right, for some greater good. In your case, you're just doing a greater good argument. The greater good is me learning that this friend was not my best friend. It kind of reminds me of the plot of Ocean's 11. Or do you remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah, the plot. He did all this stuff against that guy to show Tess that he's a jerk, right? So
right.
the it's the so that's fine. I'm just saying that um in the end, God is in control of the way I see things. I'm seeing things as bad, but they're actually things that are good for the sake of some other end. And that is, and I'm saying all of those facts lead to a reason for me to question my very perceptions. Because
Well, not
God,
necessarily. Okay,
God
so
yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Okay, so it can be bad. Okay, so let's okay. In my example, your your best friend stealing from you and damaging your house. That is, I can say that that's a bad thing, but
How?
I can, in the sense that that's not something he should be doing.
No, he should do it given the greater good, right? It's a pro toto good, which means all things considered, it ought to happen.
No, I mean because the better thing that okay, so the better thing that could have happened would be your best friend actually being your best friend and not doing things that would harm you. But since that hasn't happened, then allowing him to show himself to be not a good friend by doing those things is a good thing. So it's I guess I'm saying it's bad in the sense that he should not treat you that way, but it's since he is treating you that way, now it is good that I don't intervene because not intervening will bring about something good.
Wait, I'm just saying, look, is it a pro toto good or a pro toto evil? Meaning, pro toto means for all things considered.
Um, I guess that's where what I'm trying to get at with you is like, what if it's not necessarily pro toto good or pro toto bad? What if it's bad in one sense but good in a higher
But that's the
sense?
whole question, right? Because presumably you and I think that the Holocaust, all things considered, is a bad thing.
Yeah, yeah, I would say the Holocaust is bad, but I wouldn't say that.
Is it
I would
proto
say that
bad?
what happened is I would say that what happened is bad, but I would say that God could have a reason for not intervening, and that reason could have brought about a higher good.
That means it's a proto good, though.
Well, okay, so the issue I have with that is if you give something the label of pro toto good, it so the average person it's gonna make them it's gonna they're gonna think like, no, I can't consider these things good because the real answer is like kind of what I gave, which is that something could be bad in one sense, but good in a higher sense.
But
So,
all we're interested in, look, with respect to the Holocaust, we're wondering, is that all things considered bad or all things considered good? Like, should the thing have occurred given everything that we know? And if you know that God is using the Holocaust for some greater good, then you're committed to saying that all things considered, the Holocaust should have happened. And if that is true, then I can't rely on my moral perceptions at all. That's the point.
well, okay, so what about this line of reasoning then? Okay, so let's take something like the Holocaust, right? The
Okay.
best thing possible um would be like nobody choosing to do evil things like that. But since that best thing, because there's free will agents involved, since that best thing wasn't brought about by those free will agents, then considering the actions of those free will agents, not intervening was the best possible option, even though
Wait, wait,
those
wait.
free will
You're
agents,
saying it's not possible because of free will. That's
yeah,
what you just said, right? So we're not even
yeah,
considering that, right? We're considering, given what we know and given what's possible, okay, is the Holocaust something, all things considered, evil or bad? Saying these are synonyms, okay? And I would say yes, but if God reveals to me that, well, actually, the Holocaust is something that, all things considered, should happen, then I'm fine with that for sake of argument. What that commits me to is that I can't rely on my moral perceptions, intuitions, or reasoning at all. Because if something like the Holocaust could be something, all things considered, good, then I have no idea what good or bad is anymore.
right. I don't know. It's just like I'm trying to kind of get where you're coming from, but for me, it's like my intuition is like I have no. You have a conflict where I'm trying to understand where you have the conflict and why I don't. Okay, so my thing is just like
This
basically.
way. What I want, I pretend for sake of argument, I'm the arbiter of right and wrong.
Hold on, let me pause real quick and say one thing because
Go
I think
go
this
ahead.
will help us get to where the issue is. Okay, so um, good things like because of like we don't have all knowledge, but we have the experience of like sometimes good things somehow contribute to something bad, and sometimes bad things somehow contribute to something good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but all we're interested in is whether all things considered, things are good or bad, right? Like for instance, the vaccine. I think I should get the vaccine, all things considered. I don't like getting pricked, but all things considered, I need to get the vaccine.
Right.
Okay. So the whole question about ethics is what should I do, all things considered? And I'm fine with someone telling me that, look, your knowledge is limited, your perceptions are not unreliable. What you this is actually, all things considered, bad. But then at that point, I'm just not going to trust. I can't trust my perceptions, right? And that's the point, right? That if something like the Holocaust qualifies as something, all things considered, good, then there's no use in trusting any of my moral reasoning or perceptions.
Let me test this. Okay, let me give you a scenario. Like a certain set of circumstances goes about where let's say there's like three different possibilities. Like and all three possibilities are basically um none of them you would say is good. And your job is to pick the least bad out of all three, right?
Least bad just means the good thing.
Okay, so then
Okay.
okay, then I think that kind of resolves it then because if
No, but
God
think about the vaccine case, right? So I can get COVID and potentially die, or I can get pricked with a needle, which sucks, and survive the pandemic. What is the least bad position? The least bad is the vaccine. So, all things considered, it's good for me to get the vaccine, given my limitations and my knowledge.
Right, but do you see the contradiction is there? Um, okay, so like with the scenario, there's three things, and we know we just our moral intuition lets us know. Okay, so like let's say something bad is going to happen, and um, like all no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to stop bad things from happening. So you just have to choose like the least bad thing happening. So you're simultaneously recognizing that it's the least bad. So
The least
you're
bad look but
hold
bad.
on, hold on. Let
Good,
me finish.
right?
I'm almost done. You're granting that it's the least bad, therefore it is at least bad, but then you're turning around and saying the least bad thing is good. So that's still a contradiction, right?
No, it's not a contradiction. Look, it's not true that if it's the least bad thing to do, that therefore it's all things considered bad. The least bad does not mean all things considered bad. In fact, the least bad could very well mean, in fact, it does mean all things considered good. I think that getting a vaccine, getting pricked with a needle, right, is all things considered the right thing to do, the right thing to happen, right? And I'm just saying that if that is true of something like the Holocaust, then I cannot trust my moral perceptions or reasoning at all. Period. It's like this. Like, I mean, here's an exercise. Let's just pretend. And after this, I got to let you go. You're actually one of the best theists to talk to. And I do want to move on to other people in the panel so you can request, guys, um, because I want to get to. I spent a lot of time with this guy because I respect him. But um, here, let's just pretend for sake of argument, right, that I am the arbiter of right and wrong. Okay. That whatever is right or wrong, um, whatever I say is right and wrong is right and wrong, just for sake of argument. That might not
Well,
make
hold
sense.
on. I don't even agree with that. That's a really big thing with my philosophical belief of God is that I don't think God ordains right or
That's
wrong. I
that's
think
fine.
that I think that God is
That's
helpless as to what's
that's not
right or wrong.
art here, right? I know that might not be your view. I don't mean to suggest that it is your view, right? But let's say I decide what right and wrong is. Let's just, for sake of argument, right?
Well,
And
this is
so,
really important because it could be that morals are independent. And this, I'll just be really quick with this: is I don't
mhm.
believe God can decide to make a good thing suddenly bad or vice versa,
Look, like I said,
because
it does
God
not
cannot.
matter.
Hold
Then
on,
I can,
God cannot change. So since
yeah,
God
that's fine.
cannot
Look, look, look,
change,
look.
He cannot change His
Wait,
morals.
one second. You're missing the forest for the trees. I can just change it, right? Let's say that I am the knower of right and wrong.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. It doesn't matter, right? It could be independent, dependent, won't matter for the sake of this thought experiment. Okay. So now let's just pretend. Now you have a certain sense of right and wrong, correct? Just right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So then now you ask me questions. Okay. Well, Danny, am I right that um getting educated on and biology is a good thing? And then I might say, oh, yep, that's a good thing, right? So then you can start asking me questions. Okay. So then you don't have to do it actually. I was planning on you doing it actually, but let's say you ask me, okay, is giving to the poor, all things considered, right? And I say no. You're like, oh, okay, that's weird. Okay, and then you ask me, is stealing from Walmart, stealing candy bars from Walmart, when the economy is great and you know a bad thing? And I say, no, it's actually the right thing. And you're just like, what? Okay, is our wording a child uh, right or wrong? And then you think it's right, but then I say, well, actually, oh, sorry, you think it's wrong, but then I say something like, well, it's the right thing to do. And then suddenly what's happening here is that I'm giving you all these crazy answers in the sense that they don't conform to what you originally thought was right or wrong. And so
Okay.
at some point you're going to say, well, what the heck? I can't rely on any of what I believe to be right or wrong.
Okay. Okay. So I think there's a scenario that kind of goes on. Let's take a young child, right? And let's say that I have a son. Uh, I don't, but maybe one day.
No,
But let's say I have a son,
I
and
I don't mean
I have to.
I already said this. I only have time to entertain what I just said, right? I,
Oh, okay, gotcha, gotcha.
if you want to give the last word, I'm fine with that. You can give the last
Oh
word.
no, my bad.
Okay.
Uh,
Just Just take the
I
last
just
word.
wanted to give a scenario that kind of like goes to what you're saying, which is like, let's say I have a very young child and I'm taking him like to the doctor and I'm letting him get like a shot. And at the time, because he doesn't have sufficient moral knowledge or sufficient like awareness, he doesn't understand why I'm allowing what he feels is an evil thing at the time. He's like, "Oh, you're hurting me. That's evil." But since I'm his father, I know more. I know that this is for his good. It's possible that we are in a similar situation. God has allowed us to see things as evil, and the only reason our moral intuition can't possibly wrap our heads around them being ultimately good, as in eternity considered, is that we don't have sufficient understanding of what will be brought about by those things. All we know is that in the present moment, it's causing suffering, and our moral intuition says this is wrong. But we might not have matured enough to understand the higher moral considerations that may exist.
Hmm. Okay, I like your answer. I'm gonna only. I said I would give you the last word. I can't help but say this. It's not really. I hope you consider that the difference between your analogy and what I'm talking about is that the father is not in charge of how the perceptual faculties work. That's I think some I think that's my last thing to say. To me, that makes all the difference. But with
Ah,
that,
okay, we'll talk about that next time then.
right? Okay, all right, okay.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for the time, Danny. It was good talking to you again, and I always enjoy your life. Keep doing